Welcome into this week's issue of the Dynasty After Party here on Club Fantasy FFL. My name is Michael Sicoli, and joining me today in just a little bit is our beloved Josh Hudson. No Joel today. We'll be back at it next week. But we're continuing the Look Inside series from the Dynasty angle, from the Dynasty After Party here. We're serving up drinks for the Titans, Falcons, and Bears today. And three teams with a lot of changes, three teams with a lot of different outcomes that can happen this season, which means a lot of different things to talk about for fantasy and a lot of players to get into. So without further ado, let's jump right into the show. Here we are, Josh. It's good to have you. You know, two J names. I won't lie, for a quarter second I almost said Joel there. But how you doing
today?
I'll
take that as a compliment. It's okay.
Yeah, well, those handsome gentlemen that are always to the right of me on this show here. So how are you doing today? How is this lovely Sunday morning treating you?
Oh, this lovely Sunday morning needs to pick up the pace a little bit. Man, these late nights working in a restaurant, I tell you, they're not fun, but it's all good. I get to talk football every morning, so there's nothing wrong with that.
It shows how much of a trooper you are, Josh, and also how much I appreciate you hopping on here to help fill in for Joel and, you know, provide us with the Dynasty talk that we always love to give on these Dynasty After Party shows on these Sunday mornings.
It's a good change of pace for me because I always talk redraft, so, you know,
exactly.
I like to mix it up a little bit.
And listen, it is still Dynasty season. I'd argue it's always Dynasty season. But, you know, we're in June right now, first week of June, or I guess now second week of June. And it's still the heat of the Dynasty offseason. It's still the time to make trades. It's still the time to take advantage of the spring headlines of Caleb Williams struggling in camp. And then we'll be getting to all those concerns that we have about Caleb Williams when we talk about the Chicago Bears later. But we'll jump into all that in a little bit. Just make sure the big thing to remember with all these Look Inside series that we do here on the Dynasty After Party now is that they start up as articles on clubfantasyffl.com. So be sure to check that out. Check out all these amazing articles for every single team that are going to get done and walking through, a deep dive into the players that you want to be drafting in your drafts and maybe the players you want to avoid in your draft. So a lot of things that you can find on clubfantasyffl.com that perfectly match up with what we're talking about here on the show. So if you like this, make sure to check that out as well. Anyway, Josh, honestly, it's been kind of a middling week of headlines. There's only really one thing that might be worth talking about, and, everyone knows about the Justin Jefferson extension, but what everyone's talking about now is this CeeDee Lamb situation, the next man up, the Jamar Chase situation, the big receivers looking for their payday after what Justin Jefferson commanded. So I'm curious to you, do you have any concerns about CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase being able to get their deals done? Obviously, both those teams are going through plenty of cap considerations, but their quarterbacks being where they are.
Yeah, I mean, luckily for the Vikings, moving off of Kirk Cousins opened up a lot of money to be able to get the Justin Jefferson deal done. So now you secure that top target for your young rookie. Now you flanked him with TJ Hawkinson, who obviously got extended, I believe it was last year. And then you add in Jordan Addison as well. So now you've got a great three-headed monster in the passing attack for a team that shouldn't really be shy about throwing the football. That's what they've done quite a bit over the years with Kirk Cousins. When it comes to CeeDee Lamb, with these guys, it's always they got to top the next one, right? So I'm sure in Lamb's head, he's like, well, if Jefferson got 35, I'm worth 36 or 35-1 or 35-2. You know what I mean? So I think in reality, you can put the numbers right next to each other. Lamb has been really, really, really good. He has been. He hasn't been Justin Jefferson good. So I think if he can get 34 or like 34-5, 34-3, even 33, I think that would still put him over AJ Brown as the second highest paid wide receiver on a per average annual value. So I think that would still be a really good extension for him, just from I'm getting paid like one of the top guys kind of thing. But you still, if you're Dallas, let's be real, you've waited way too long. Because Micah Parsons needs to get paid. Dak Prescott's going into the last year of his deal. I mean, you're going to potentially have 3 guys on this team making $130 million combined. Now, granted, the salary cap has continually gone up, but that can't do well for your ability to build a competitive team over the life of those 3 contracts. And that is going to screw up Dallas, which, hey, I'm fine with as an Eagles fan. By all means, doesn't matter to me. But at the end of the day, Dallas fans in general really cannot be happy about this.
Yeah, and it's a different Dallas team than what we had in past years. This has kind of been a lot of, like, not a lot of turnover this offseason, but it's been trending this way in a little bit of, if we had to look about the prime Cowboys of the last 5 years, it was about 3 years ago of the prime Zeke, when Zeke was still able to move and not what he is now, returning to the Cowboys. And you had Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, and you had a ascending Mike Gallup. And all those pieces are either gone, different, or out the door, which is also gone. And things change like that. So I'm
curious.
Yeah.
I'm curious because I want to get your thoughts on this. So we saw what happened with Minnesota and how they essentially just said, you know what, Cousins, you've reached your peak. We haven't been able to get over the hump with you. We're going to kind of hit that like soft reset button. And they did it right before paying their young wide receiver.
I know what you're going to ask.
Do we think that there's a chance that Dallas does the same thing? They pay CeeDee Lamb, but let Dak walk out the door and then take a chance on one of these, quarterbacks from arguably not a great quarterback class.
I very rarely say about anything in the NFL that can't happen. I think we've seen crazy enough things at this point that I wouldn't be surprised. But I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say Dak is still going to be that quarterback of the future. I still firmly believe in Dak. I've never been a believer in Mike McCarthy, and I think that's the change that has been 5 years ever since he was hired, whatever, probably around 5 years ago. That's been 5 years overdue. But I think it's a good question to bring up because it's one of those topics we're not talking about yet, but we should be, because it is a realistic outcome. It's realistic that they reset. They have Trey Lance in the wings. Hey, listen, no one's counting on Trey Lance to be anything, but this was a top 5 pick that the Cowboys went out and got when they didn't need to get a backup quarterback in that way. So.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a realistic situation where they pay CeeDee Lamb, they let Dak walk. They go into the season giving Trey Lance the opportunity while spending a top pick on a quarterback. I mean, let's be real. They obviously have a relationship with Deion Sanders. Who's to say that Shador isn't their target heading into this draft class, right? I mean, it could realistically be a chance. And then they go into 2025 with Trey Lance versus insert rookie quarterback to see who's going to get CeeDee Lamb 190 targets.
It's possible. All these things are possible. And I think that in this world, let's keep playing this one out. If Dak Prescott does see the door, what happens to Dak Prescott? I mean, he would obviously find a starting job somewhere else. I can't imagine he would ever.
Some team's going to pay him $60 million a year. Let's be real.
That's the crux of it, right? Is you have to imagine Dak is starting somewhere else. He's still a very good quarterback. You might wonder about how far he can go, but he's still very, very much a starting NFL quarterback. But where does he go where he's going to get paid? Because he's not going to get – I agree with you that no one's going to shell out the $60 million for him. So are there any teams on the early watch list that you think, in theory, in this magical realm of a world where Dallas actually hits the nuclear reset button?
Well, just looking at cap space available, and obviously this is all projected because we don't know what the salary cap is going to be for 2025. Right now, the Patriots have $93.1 million of effective cap space, and that's not including what they can roll over from 2024. And they currently have the most available cap space for this year at $46 million. They did just spend the pick on Drake May. So I think that would probably take them out of the Dak Prescott sweepstakes. Yeah. Same thing with the Commanders. They would be rolling over $44.5 million. They're sitting at roughly $80 million of available cap space. But the next closest teams, like kind of at that top, Right now, Dallas has $65.4 million of available cap space for 2025. The Bears at 58. The Jets at 58. I mean, if Rodgers only plays the 1 year and then they go out and they get the big ticket in Dak has experience in big markets. Jets have proven that they can't develop a quarterback. Just go the free agent route, right? Dak to Garrett Wilson. I can sign up for that.
I think fantasy owners certainly would after watching Zach Wilson throw to Garrett Wilson for the last 2 years, and it's been certainly not fun doing that. Listen, I'll throw it out there.
Raiders could be an option too.
I was
going to say this. The Steelers were on my radar too. They have 68.9 currently for 2025, and then they're rolling over as of right now a little over 16 million. So they could definitely make that happen.
Yeah, no, it'll be certainly outside the pocket of what the Steelers usually do, but that's been the trend so far with Omar Khan is zigging where past GMs have zagged.
Yep.
So all the stuff is why we love the NFL, is because we're going to have these changing pieces that will be just as much talking points in 6 months as they will be in 2 months and in a year. So all of that will be super fun to get into. So before we get into the Look Inside series, I know that we have some nice little news that we want to share with our listeners here, Josh. And also I want to say quickly, good morning to Gator and good morning to Scampers. Always good to see two of our favorite people in the world popping in the stream there.
Yeah, so we have a new sponsor here at Club Fantasy. It's great. We have a partnership deal with Dynasty Nerds. So head over to dynastynerds.com. Take advantage of all the great tools that they have. Their film room, which is absolutely fantastic, great for all 22 and studying up on college prospects before they come into the NFL. Their trade calculator is a really great tool. You can also do simulated mock drafts on there. You can import your league settings and do the mock drafts directly from the Dynasty Nerds platform. You can go to their website, dynastynerds.com, or download the Dynasty Nerds app on your mobile phone. At checkout, use code CLUBFANTASY and save yourself 15% off of the membership fee. Now, that's either tier. Doesn't have to be one or the other. It could be the bundles. It could be the individual tiers, whatever it is. Enter code CLUBFANTASY and save 15% for instant access at dynastynerds.com.
You know, Josh, one of my favorite memories of that as bad as 2020 was and as bad as COVID was, one of my favorite memories of getting into Dynasty Fantasy Football and getting into content creation as much as I did was by watching the film room of Dynasty Nerds and getting into that the craft and everything that they have there at the tools. It's a really great group of guys. It's a really awesome podcast as well to listen to. So highly recommend taking advantage of that 15% discount. Again, using code Club Fantasy, right? Club Fantasy, or not FFL at the end, right?
Club Fantasy, yep.
Nice and simple like that. Anyway, with all that said and done, let's jump into a team that has every opportunity to surprise a lot of people this year in the AFC South, and that is the Tennessee Titans, bringing in a new coaching staff here with Brian Callahan taking over at head coach, and you got Brian Callahan once again calling plays. He brought over his father, and I always forget his father's name. Please, good God, help me, for the legend offensive line.
Father's name is Bill.
Bill, thank you. I always mix up with the B's. So, legendary offensive line coach Bill Callahan as well, to a team that has struggled on the offensive line in recent years. So, thoughts about the Tennessee Titans? We have a whole new regime coming in. Any overall expectations before we dive into three players that we want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, initial thoughts. I have no idea how they're building this team. Seriously, this is like when you come into a dynasty league and maybe like you're taking over an orphan and you're looking at the roster and you're just like, what exactly was this person trying to accomplish? That's how I look at the Tennessee Titans and what Rand Carthen has done and how he's trying to build this team. I truthfully cannot figure out for the life of me what they're trying to accomplish. It's great that they have a young quarterback. That's fantastic. All of his weapons, like his top three receivers, are all 30 or turning 30 this year. Which, I mean, I guess isn't the worst thing because, you know, veterans can help a young quarterback grow. but you kind of want to have that like key young piece that kind of grows with the young quarterback. But when your top 3 guys are turning 30 this year and the first round draft pick that you spent on a wide receiver is basically like kicked to the curb, and you're trying to tell him the only way you're going to make this team is to be a gunner on special teams, kind of doesn't make a ton of sense.
I can't stress. I don't talk about Treylon Burks enough on this show about how much I love Treylon Burks and how much I loved him as a prospect and how much the Titans have done a utter disservice in making this man a great NFL wide receiver. He spent more time getting decapitated on NFL fields than he did getting targets. And
yeah,
like he's just spent so much time off of it because of unlucky plays. They're DeMar Hamlin launching himself into Treylon Burks' head on a terrific touchdown catch. That, then he doesn't play a few weeks after that because of a huge concussion. It's been absolutely wild and a shame, really. Like I think I only have one Treylon Burks share left in Dynasty, and he's so far buried on my roster that I'm just like, that's fine. If it pops, it pops. If not, you find waivers. Like, it is what it is. Yeah, and that's where people sent me a 4th for him, and I can't. No.
Oh, it's so funny. So my co-host Joe Zolo, in the one league that I have him in, he offered me like a 5th round pick for him right when they signed
Boyd.
I think it was either Calvin Ridley or Tyler Boyd, one of those two, and I was just like, "Come on, dude." Like, stop. I'm not moving him for that.
At this point, we're holding out for a trade. And at this point, I mean, everything in the past would tell you that a trade should come here. You have a very clear-cut out of the picture, very clear-cut not with this regime. He's still young enough, and the draft hype was still recent enough that somebody should still have him, have hope for him just based on the board and the malpractice in Tennessee. So I hope he gets traded. I think he will because it
would make sense.
Just such a weird
situation. But and this is the problem, right? Like, if they end up trading Treylon Burks this year, they're likely going to move him in training camp. He's not going to have a lot of time with that team's playbook. No. And now you're looking at year 3 of his rookie deal that's wasted.
Yep.
It's the same thing that happened with Jalen Reagor in Philly, right? Like, Reagor was trending down anyway, but they waited so long in the offseason to move him that there was just no hope for a bounce back. So you're like Treylon Burks at this point, you're just hoping for the Devontae Parker 5th-year breakout. Like that's what you're hoping for. It's a
pipe dream. It's a complete pipe dream that everything, as much as I say everything in the past would suggest that he will get traded and that opportunity could come, everything in the past would also suggest that it's not going to happen with Treylon Burks. Yep. So we're all going down on the ship together, it feels like, because none of us are going to sell for the 5th and the 4th round picks that were being offered. But now you touched on it right there, Josh, and one of the reasons why everyone is so worried about why Treylon Burks is out of the picture and why we have this older group of guys coming in is because of Calvin Ridley and the money that they shelled out for him and giving him, what was it, $98 million over 4 years, a front-loaded deal, but quite the big one, coming off ultimately a disappointing tenure with the Jaguars. So
was it disappointing though? I mean, he hadn't played football in 2 years and still had 1,000 yards.
I don't blame him. Like I don't hold it against him, and I think we had too high. I think I had too high expectations for him coming off, a situation that we haven't really seen people deal with, of being forced away from football for gambling and mental health and a whole bunch of different things. So it was a unique circumstance. I think I say disappointed because I think ultimately we were hoping for more. We were hoping for that Trevor Lawrence MVP leap, thanks to him being paired with a Calvin Ridley, fresh off the here we go. He's now the guy with Julio out the picture, and he did all this great thing. So I think disappointment is fair, but now we're 2 years removed from that 1 year hiatus. So what do you think Ridley could be putting up in Tennessee? Obviously changes situations, but a good coaching staff to do it with.
I think this is a really good situation for him, and I think this is a really good offense for him. The one thing that Calvin Ridley has proved to us as not only football fans, but fantasy football managers, is that while he's a really good wide receiver, he's not a good enough wide receiver to elevate a quarterback, right? Like, he's not the the Jeffersons, the Lambs, the A.J. Browns, the Stephon Diggs, right? He is firmly in that next tier of, I'm a good wide receiver. I can be a number one on a bad team, or I can be a really good 1B on a good team, right? Ridley's value is going to lie in how big of a leap Will Levis can make in a short period of time. Because if this offense is set up to be Cincinnati Bengals light, right? It's going to be the similar system. I don't know how much they're going to throw because Joe Burrow has never had an issue throwing the football. 2 years ago in the shortened 16-game season for them, Burrow was on pace for like 640 pass attempts that year, which I think boils down to about 37 or 38 pass attempts per game.
Yeah.
Will Levis in his second year is not going to throw that many footballs. When I did my projections for 2024, I have him at about 32, which I think is still kind of high, but I think is just enough to where it's good growth for where a young quarterback can be in this type of system. And that's why they went out and got Tony Pollard. And we'll talk about that running back room here in a bit. But with Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins is still good. Has he lost a step? Sure, but he's still good. I mean, we talk about how disappointing of a season Calvin Ridley had in 2023. The same could, in theory, be said for DeAndre Hopkins, but he still had over 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. So, it's like once Will Levis started to get a little comfortable, he started to get more comfortable throwing to DeAndre Hopkins. Now you add the element where Hopkins has some cushion because Hopkins has always had to be the number one guy. He's never had a viable number two option. Now that he's going, I stand by my statement. So going into, age 32, even if he's the 1A, Calvin Ridley can be a really good 1B, or Calvin Ridley can be the 1A, but still have a quality wide receiver to take a little bit of pressure off of him, right? So I think that, and then of course you add in Tyler Boyd, who knows how to play the slot, especially in this offense. Will Levis has the pieces to take a big second-year leap. Calvin Ridley, I think really the expectations going forward, 70 to 77 catches, maybe 1,200 yards if you're lucky, 6 to 8 touchdowns. I think that's pretty much your stat line, right? That's a top 20 wide receiver. So I think I would probably put him in that top 25 range in Dynasty over the next couple of years. But again, so much of that is tied to how much can Will Levis grow in this system.
And I think that process of how much Will Levis can grow is exactly why I feel okay with this process that they're going with Tennessee. It's out of the box of not pairing the young stud receiver with the young quarterback, and it's not grabbing the rookie class to pair with another rookie quarterback. But this is a team that is perfectly set up to execute what Brian Callahan wants to do as a head coach. And it's what you touched on at the top of it. And it's what I brought up in the beginning was that this team wants to air it out more than we've seen with Tennessee in the past. I agree with you. That's not going to be the Joe Burrow volume because he's not Joe Burrow, and it makes no sense to treat Will Levis like he's Joe Burrow. But this isn't Derrick Henry. This is a Tony Pollard that is coming off a down year and a Tyjae Spears that isn't, as much as I love Tyjae Spears, and I've battled with Joel repeatedly about Tyjae Spears. Tyjae Spears is not.
All right, you'll have some support from me, Sicoli. I got you.
Thank you, man. Who needs ACLs? All ACLs are good for the That is my firm take.
They only cost you years of football. That's all.
I've never seen a player without an ACL tear one. So that's I can't. This is ridiculous. But the fun thing
before we transition into Tyjae Spears, I want to ask you this. So looking at the ages of this wide receiver room, right? Like Calvin Ridley is going to be 30 in December. Tyler Boyd's 30 in November. DeAndre Hopkins just turned 32. I like we just talked about at the top of this segment, Treylon Burks, kiss of death at this point, right?
Yep.
This is still another pretty solid wide receiver class that's coming out. we've seen Tennessee the last couple of years invest pretty heavily in their offensive line. They bring in arguably one of the best, if not the best, offensive line coaches, not just in the NFL today, but in NFL history, in Bill Callahan. Do you think next year there is a scenario where Tennessee ends up taking a wide receiver in the first round and bringing in somebody that can, kind of take over for DeAndre Hopkins, who has like 3 void years after this year? So I think, his time in Tennessee is pretty much over. Could even be over by the trade deadline, in all honesty, depending on how the season starts for Tennessee. And then they start kind of working him in as the 1B to Calvin Ridley's 1A, and then they're ready to kind of take over after, 2025 or whatever it is for Ridley, because it is a front-loaded contract. There's no guaranteed money after 2026.
I think it's 100% possible. I think it's funny because we started this show talking about CeeDee Lamb, and it would almost feel like a similar situation of when CeeDee Lamb first entered the league with Dallas, we viewed it as a very crowded room. It was Amari Cooper, it was ascending players, it was just busy. It was busy. And we weren't exactly sure.
Cream always rises to the top,
Exactly. It was a pure best player available pick, and it worked out, obviously, for Dallas. I think we could see a very similar page taken out in Tennessee next year, even if Hopkins is back, even if, obviously, Ridley will be back, even if they somehow brought back Tyler Boyd, and they totally went with a 3. If they take a good receiver prospect in the first round, he will find his way on the field at some point. And I think it would be. I think it's very much in the cards as well, because we agree that Treylon Burks' time is done. So if Will Levis works out, great, get him another weapon. If Will Levis doesn't work out, great, go back to the drawing board that's worked for other teams. Pair the young quarterback with the young receiver, or bring in a veteran and bring in that young receiver anyway. That will still help your team. So. It'll all come down to best player available. I think for Tennessee, I think they're still in that position. And with next year's class, I think defense could probably be the way they go. But if they're looking offense, it makes perfect sense to look receiver. I think that would make a lot of sense.
You want to hear another fun scenario?
With Tennessee, I don't think of fun much, but go for it.
Cincinnati doesn't re-sign T. Higgins. Free agency, Higgins goes to Tennessee. Now you've got Higgins and Calvin Ridley.
Why not? Sure. Why not?
It could happen. I mean, this is what teams do, right? They follow, like, hey, you've got a relationship with my coaching staff. I want you because you don't need to learn as much, right?
Yeah,
familiarity
it
in the
matters
system.
So much. Yeah, it's the same. Like we always I think we forget about it, and I'm going to try not to drone on here, but we forget about how much connections just matter in the NFL just as much as they do in the real world. We all use them to try to get a step ahead in this crazy world we all navigate. And we just saw this, a week ago with Sterling Shepard getting a job in Tampa Bay just because he worked with Baker and he took advantage of that connection. And I like what you're saying right now is something we'll be speculating about in 6 months.
Yep.
Like you I already know you're going to be ahead of the ball on this because
first on the train, baby.
We'll clip it and then we'll repost it in 6 months when everyone else is talking about, well, T. Higgins, the extension didn't get done. Tennessee, maybe they're looking on. They might have traded DeAndre Hopkins. Tennessee isn't ready for DeAndre Hopkins type of older prospect. I think T. Higgins could make a lot of sense there, and maybe even more so than going to the draft board. And it would allow them to attack defense even more, which they still need to do on that pass rush. But yeah, I mean, we touched on it a little bit before. Let's jump into a little bit more with Tyjae Spears. ACL list, who cares? Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears taking the role here. UDFA, Dylan Johnson, who feels like he's always trending on Sleeper at this point on the trending page, is also added to the room. And once again, the Julius Chestnut, Hassan Haskins speculative role of he's the bigger guy. And they don't have a ton of bigger guys now that Derrick Henry's gone. So maybe he can make a role. But either way, it's Tyjae Spears and Tony Pollard. What are your thoughts on this room and what we can expect for Dynasty?
Yeah, this is Tennessee and Brian Callahan trying to replicate Joe Mixon, but with 2 running backs. Because these 2 running backs are basically the same player, plain and simple. Tyjae Tony Pollard is, I think, 6 feet 209, and Tajay Spears is like 5'10", 200. They play very similar styles. They're both very solid in the passing game, and they've got a lot of juice when they're able to hit the outside. We've talked a long time on the flagship, no pun intended, on Wednesdays. Tony Pollard is fantastic in a split backfield. What was he not in last year? A split backfield. What is he in this year? A split backfield. So I think people are really underrating him. I've actually, I haven't always been the biggest Tony Pollard fan, and I faded him hard last year. I'm buying back in. I'm picking up pieces in Dynasty because people are willing to move him for a lot less than they were last year. I got him in one deal on the day of our rookie draft just to move back, from the 103 to 104. I had the person at the 104 throw in Tony Pollard to move up.
That's brilliant.
That's the kind of value that he has lost heading into this year because of the situation. But this contract is a 2-year contract, right? So he's there for at least the next 2 years. So even if Tajay Spears pops, Tony Pollard is still going to have value because they're going to be very interchangeable pieces. I do like Tony Pollard more and even Tajay Spears as well, more from a dynasty best ball perspective, because I think this is going to be a situation where Callahan runs the hot hand. And some of these games you might see Spears with, say, 6 carries and 3 catches, and then one game with 7 catches and maybe 12 carries, right? So there's going to be a lot of ebbs and flows here. The biggest thing is going to be who ends up getting that red zone usage, because neither of these backs are bigger backs, right? Yeah. So, but this offense produced 29 rushing touchdowns just from Joe Mixon over the last 3 years. Now, you can sit here and tell me, oh, Joe Mixon just knows how to find the end zone. Or, man, that system that Joe Mixon's running in is really freaking good for running backs. So if it's the latter, Tony Pollard's quote-unquote inefficiency in the red zone the last couple of years isn't going to matter. And the same goes for Tajay Spears, in all honesty. And
I think that's the perfect point of following up what you were saying before about them being this very similar players. Mm-hmm. Of that hot hand, I think is such a good such a good term to represent this backfield, because it's going to be frustrating at times. Unlike Joe Mixon had to compete with Samaje Perine for those passing down snaps, and he managed to get his receptions because Smith-Njigba Perine isn't that great of an NFL player. Tajay Spears is a much better player. So when you look at these offenses and you compare them of still having that 3-stack at receiver, that's going to leave a lot of fluctuation on the running back targets, I think, especially when we're riding the hot hand and when they're going to be evenly splitting, because I think this is going to be I don't think it'll ever be more than 60-40 between these two guys.
And I think even then you're probably looking at 53-47, truthfully. Even last year with Derrick Henry, it was Derrick Henry and Tajay Spears. Those were literally the only 2 running backs that touched the football. So if both of these guys stay healthy, which, they did last year, and that's surprising considering Tony Pollard suffered a pretty gruesome leg injury the year prior, you're still looking at these 2 guys dominating, I'd say, on a healthy season, anywhere from 95 to 100% rushing share.
Yeah. And like you said, they both make each other better. So it's a really good pairing. And that's why I really think this Tennessee team could surprise a lot of people, because I like what they've done. The only question mark, and we'll jump right into the next guy here, and the only question mark is Will Levis. This situation is perfectly set up for Will Levis to succeed. You have DeAndre Hopkins, you have Calvin Ridley, you got that boy in the slot, 2 good running backs. You got at least an athletic tight end in Chico Okonkwo. You have a repaired offensive line. You got an offensive mind head coach that is perfectly built to work with a quarterback. But Will Levis, who puts mayo in his coffee? What are expectations? What are fair expectations for Will Levis, Josh, with all the help?
What was it? His second start, and he threw 4 touchdowns passes, 3 of them to DeAndre Hopkins.
And trucked over 7 others. Yeah.
That goes to show you the type of upside that Will Levis can have. And, everybody knew he had a big arm coming out of college, right? We all knew that. We all knew that he had skills. It was, can he turn those skills into some level of consistency? Well, you know how you start to do that? You put a good offensive line in front of him and you give the guy some weapons. Check and check by the Titans this offseason. So I think this year you're going to see a really solid leap in production from Will Levis. Because if you don't, I don't know how this team can really look at him. And I understand that, it's the second year. Like, just teams don't have the patience that they used to. And the other side of the coin, Brian Callahan didn't draft Will Levis, right? So he's not going to care that Rand Carthen drafted Will Levis. What he's going to care is, this guy can't run my system. Give me someone that can. So this is kind of, and I hate to say it because it's his second year. It's a make or break year for Will Levis. It truly is. But we've seen him be athletic enough that he can pick up some yards on the ground, which I think gives him that, 200 to 300 rushing yard ceiling, which fantasy managers love.
I think it would be more.
And because of the weapons and because of this system, if he actually maximizes that potential, he has 30 to 35 passing touchdowns per year potential. I don't think that happens this year, but that's the trajectory that we can see for Will Levis because of this situation that he's in.
Yeah.
And that's what I want as a dynasty manager, right? Like if I can find a way to get him as like my QB2, I would do that in a heartbeat, even if it cost me just a single like late first round pick in Superflex.
It might cost you less even in Superflex, which is crazy. But
yeah,
I mean, like I think I'd rather have Will Levis than Daniel Jones right now. And
yes.
Yeah, but I think that's the range he's still going in, because I think we have so many concerns about people weren't high on him as a prospect, and they didn't see anything last year outside of that really one explosive game that I think really shaped our memory of him, because he was pretty bad after that. But the one thing with Will Levis, with the arm being what it was, he was pretty good throwing it deep. He had these are numbers from Player Profiler, but number 2 in deep ball catchable pass rate at 57.9%, which is number 2 in the NFL. And he also threw the ball deep quite a lot, which is a perfect fit in theory for what Brian Callahan wants to do. And being, I believe he was number 1 in air yards per attempt. So when you're airing it out, which again is why I think Brian Callahan didn't pursue any other alternatives at quarterback this year, because on paper, this is a good match. This is a good, what the hell am I looking for? It's a good relationship. It makes sense. You have a quarterback that can throw deep and wants to throw deep, and you have an offensive mind who wants your quarterback to throw and throw deep. So everything's set up for Will Levis to have a downright monster year. Whether he can do that is
a different story.
Another question mark in itself. So maybe that guy we talked about at the top of the show, Dak Prescott, is playing in Tennessee next year.
Could be.
That would be
he can air it out like Joe Burrow.
Yeah, listen. I'm on the topic of teams spending up for quarterbacks. I feel like we just got to jump right into the Atlanta Falcons here. So looking inside here of the Atlanta Falcons, and why not start at the top here with Kirk Cousins, of this new coaching staff and this new regime now in Atlanta has turned the page on Arthur Smith, and I think quite justifiably. You got the same GM that's been there for quite a while now, or at least it feels like 4 seasons, with Terry Fontenot, and Raheem Morris taking over a head coach, Zach Robinson calling plays from that Sean McVay Los Angeles Rams system. Kirk Cousins, they went out and got him, and then they spent a first-round pick on Michael Penix, which was curious, but we've talked about that ad nauseum. So Kirk Cousins will be the starter for at least the next year, and most likely 2. What are your thoughts about Kirk Cousins, and what do you think his dynasty value is looking like, even with Penix looking over the shoulder?
Kirk Cousins would be my sneaky buy for dynasty. Like, that's a guy that if I needed a quarterback, I would be going out and throwing that projected late first, a couple of seconds to try to get, simply because the weapons on this team, they've literally spent 3 straight top 10 picks on offensive talent. Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson. He had some really good, talented players in Minnesota, right? He had Justin Jefferson. He had TJ Hawkinson. He had Dalvin Cook for a little bit. He had Jordan Addison last year. Kirk Cousins knows how to distribute the football. He's the ultimate point guard when it comes to NFL, right? You don't love the fact that they went out and got Michael Penix because that basically puts Cousins on a much shorter leash, and coming off of the Achilles injury, not always the best proposition, but that's why I say like that, you know, the 2 seconds, the late first and Superflex, that to me is a worthy gamble on an older player that we've seen produce elite numbers. They're just not sexy because they don't come with rushing yards, right? But in Superflex, in that second QB spot, that's a perfect dynasty quarterback, in my opinion. So, yeah, go out and get Kirk Cousins if somebody's willing to sell him. Or, you know, if you don't already have him.
I listen, and as someone who actually sold him earlier this offseason, despite not wanting to, I sold him more or less for George Pickens and a package around him. But if you're going to look at Kirk Cousins to have a good year, you can't ask for a better coordinator to do it with than Zach Robinson in terms of, yeah, sure, he's unproven. So yeah, maybe you could ask for better ones, but it's his first time doing it. But from this system and what we have heard about the hype about Zach Robinson as this McVay disciple is such a good pairing with a quarterback that has been asked to do so much for Minnesota for past years and was asked to do so much for Washington before that. So I like this situation that he's in. I think it's a really good set of weapons around him. I think it's like, obviously Justin Jefferson is Justin Jefferson, but you don't have a Jefferson, but you have a billion pieces that were better than the next piece up in Minnesota. And as much as I love TJ Hawkinson and Jordan Addison, I think that's the case where, you know, I think Drake London could be a very good wide receiver. I think Kyle Pitts can be a freak of nature. And I think Bijan Robinson is a freak of nature. So all these things are set up to take advantage here. And if I really, really dive into it, if I really peel back how much how ugly it is to say, Josh, I like Darnell Mooney in this offense. It just made it like it's a good pairing with Kirk Cousins. You got a quarterback that is one of the best in the league at throwing deep. And you have Darnell Mooney that is the only thing he can do is go deep and then drop the ball. But if he doesn't drop the ball,
look, he's not MVS. All right, the dude can actually run routes.
Yes, that's the thing. He's MVS who can run routes. Sure, sometimes he'll make a boneheaded play, but he'll get open deep and it'll work for Kirk Cousins. So I think a lot of these, like I in a similar situation we're talking with Tennessee, I think very much Kirk Cousins is set up to succeed in Atlanta. He's got a good defense, he's got a good running game, he's got good weapons, and he's got the coaching staff to put it all into play. So Atlanta's going on pushing the chips in with that, well, hedging, I guess, with Michael Penix, and I think Kirk Cousins will once again be a terrific value in Dynasty, where every year we're talking about him being drafted in the QB 18 range, QB 16 range for Dynasty, and he always finishes inside the top 10 every single year on volume. I don't think that's going to change now.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I mean, obviously the biggest key, how does he bounce back from the Achilles? But it's very different with a quarterback than it is, like a running back or a wide receiver. So,
yeah, and that is the nice thing about it. But either way, we'll keep on tracking that throughout the summer about that recovery process. And someone we don't have to do that is Bijan Robinson, because Bijan Robinson, the heart and soul of fantasy managers. I'll just start off with the big question that everyone wonders when it comes to the word dynasty and the word or the phrase name Bijan Robinson. Is he the dynasty RB1 for you, Josh?
No, he's the dynasty RB2 because you can't convince me otherwise that it's not Christian McCaffrey. I don't care how old he is. He is the only running back that when you actually look at him and see what his past production has shown and the current situation that he's in, that he can average 25 plus fantasy points per game. No other running back offers that upside. And if you're playing Dynasty the way that you should play Dynasty, which is in 2 to 3 year windows and not 5 to 7, otherwise you would never own a running back ever, Christian McCaffrey is your RB1. But Bijan's a really close two. I've been on record saying this, and I will continue to say it. If there's any running back that can dethrone Christian McCaffrey in 2024, it is Bijan Robinson. because in my opinion, he's going to have the target volume this year that I don't think Breece Hall will put up this year that he did put up last year, if that makes sense. Like with if Aaron Rodgers plays a full season, he's not throwing the football to the running back 90 times. I can tell you that right now.
No.
In this offense, which is an extension of McVay, which is an extension of Shanahan, they have proven that they have no issue giving a running back 60 to 70% of the touches. I don't care what is on Tyler Allgeier's resume that he had 1,000 yards his rookie year.
Old regime.
Jordan Howard had a couple 1,000-yard seasons too, and he fell off pretty quickly. Bijan Robinson was a top 8 pick in the NFL draft as a running back. He is a weapon. Guess what Christian McCaffrey is? A weapon. If Bijan Robinson stays healthy for 17 games, he is going to have close to 400 touches in this offense, and he's going to approach 2,000 total yards. And we've seen him score a ton of touchdowns, 29 touchdowns over his final 2 seasons in college, and that was just on the ground. Last year, he even had 4 receiving touchdowns in the NFL. There are very few running backs that have that kind of pass-catching upside.
Number 1 in route run, number 2 in route participation, number 3 in target share among running backs. He
actually had more targets last year than Bijan Robinson than Christian McCaffrey.
Arthur Smith. That's with Arthur Smith and Desmond Ridder. Things are like it. I'll be the one that bites the bullet and say that Bijan Robinson is my RB1 for Dynasty because But
that's a valid argument. Like I mean, you're because he's 5 years younger than CMC, it makes perfect sense. Now, if you're trying to convince me that Jahmyr Gibbs is the RB1, I'm going to fucking go have you drug tested because you need to get off your high horse. Like, it's just not it. Breece Hall, all right, you can make the argument. It's not there for me, but I'll listen, right? Like, it's one of those things where there's three guys that I'm looking at in that top tier, right? It's CMC, it's Bijan Robinson, it's Breece Hall. Those are your top 3 RBs in Dynasty, in my opinion. Everybody else is second fodder.
I was curious if you're going to include your new Eagle Saquon Barkley in the bottom of that top tier. No,
I wouldn't. He's not in that top tier. To me, he's in that second tier. And the only reason I say that is because it's more so just a product of the Giants just completely wasting his early years. But I mean, the problem is that we just haven't seen fully healthy seasons from Saquon. That's why I can't put him in that top tier.
Yeah.
Now, if he goes out and has a really healthy season this year, gives me some hopes for going forward because I know how good the Eagles' offensive line is. But I mean, like, if I have the opportunity to, trade like Breece Hall and like tear down and get like Saquon in a first, I would do that.
Yeah,
I would. But
it's always a good process on this show to trade to drop down in running back tier and acquire a pick. It will never be shamed on this show.
That's what I did a couple of years ago. I traded Saquon for Travis Etienne in a first. Like, that worked out pretty well. So
yeah, and I'm sure people at the time might have called you crazy because of what Saquon Barkley was perceived to be. Because selling high on a running back, and that's something that Joel I battled with Joel a little bit on this show about of. You can, and I ultimately I do agree with them that you can 100% justify selling Bijan Robinson. I firmly believe that Bijan Robinson will make the jump this year into that firm RB1, and we won't even think twice about it. And we love Christian McCaffrey, but he can be a step. He will be behind Bijan Robinson. That jump, I think, will be made, and I can say that sentence and believe that sentence while still saying Bijan Robinson could be a terrific dynasty sell. Because of how much we value running backs until we don't. It's such a risk. And we know that Bijan Robinson, of what I paid to get Bijan Robinson, it speaks to the value that he still has and what I could turn into if I wanted to reset my team, if I wanted to reallocate my assets. Because as much as I believe that about Bijan Robinson, he gets hurt in week 2, it's all over. Not all over, but it's everything everything
Yeah,
changes.
it's a lot different when running backs go out and get hurt versus
Exactly.
when wide receivers go out and get hurt. It's a very different story.
Especially when we know that Tyler Algier should be able to hold the load. And if Tyler Algier ends up being asked to do, step in for Bijan, and he does well with that role, as we've seen him do in the past, we go into next year saying, oh, well, Bijan is terrific, but Algier should have a role. I mean, he'll have 30, 40% of snaps, something like that, not 40. But he would take a role. And all those things happen with one unlucky step. And that happens with running backs more than it does with any other position. So it's always a good process to at least explore the market, as much as I love.
You also can't convince me otherwise that Bijan isn't some part like metal man, because the way that he got flipped at Tennessee and landed on his neck going like this and then just bounced back up like nothing happened. That dude's fucking Gumby, man. Like, I don't know how. That's ridiculous.
He is playing. I knock on wood when I say it. He's playing life on just invincible mode. He is rubber man, bounce off. You can't bring him
down. He's mad with injuries off.
Well, yeah. All right. Well, London, is it falling down? Drake London, the last piece of this Falcons team we want to talk about here. It's Drake London is one of the most confusing people in Dynasty fantasy football for me, because I did not love him as a prospect, and I wanted to love him as a prospect. I like USC receivers. I like the young breakout. He didn't, if I trust my eye test, he didn't do it for me. I don't always trust my eye test. I don't use it as the entire
in this case, you should not trust your eye test, because Drake London is really fucking good at football.
Then we're going to see it this year, aren't we?
Yeah. Damn straight we're going to see it this year. Third-year wide receiver breakouts, baby. Name a rookie wide receiver that had a 28% target share. That silence is beckoning. Drake London had a 28% target share as a rookie. Well, didn't translate to a ton of targets because it was a very low passing volume offense, but 28% is still 28%.
Who was the wide receiver 2 for that team? Goodell Hodge?
I don't fucking know. Kyle Pitts was still on that team after a 1,000-yard rookie season.
I'm not diminishing what London was able to do in that rookie season in very difficult circumstances with really bad situations. So,
but we've seen Kirk Cousins hyper target wide receivers. We've seen it. Zach Robinson was the passing game coordinator for Sean McVay with the Rams. What have the Rams done the past few years? They've hyper targeted Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Transitive properties. What do you think is going to happen in Atlanta?
So we're hearing it here first from Josh that Drake London is Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. We have 1,500 yards, 10 touchdowns coming through.
He's big enough to score 10 touchdowns easy. The dude has a really good contested catch rate. Yeah, that's not the issue. The issue was always getting him the football. Now he has a quarterback that can get him the football. So, yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, because look, we can talk about how much we like Darnell Mooney, how he can get deep. He is a really good route runner, especially in the short yardage areas. And Darnell Mooney's had 140 target season prior to Justin Fields. Now he comes in as a quality number 2 option. That's still the 4th target in this offense behind London, Pitts, and Bijan. So how much target share is Darnell Mooney truly going to have? That's going to leave all of the passes being funneled to Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson. Why can't Drake London have a 25% target share with an increased target volume?
There's no reason he can't.
Exactly. So if that happens this year, why wouldn't that happen next year, and the year after, and the year after, right? You're playing in these 3-year windows. It very much can happen. Now, the problem lies with his value, right? So I want to give a quick shout out to Carrington in the chat watching. Carrington sent me a DM yesterday, and he asked me, how would you value Drake London in Dynasty? So, Sicoli, I want to get your opinion before I give you what I told him. Like, if you had Drake London, what would you want in return? And on the flip side, if you were trying to acquire Drake London, what would you be willing to offer?
Man, I wish I was a bigger Drake London guy because I'm never in this circumstance where I haven't been. I don't think I'm willing to hit the price.
So take your bias out of it. Take your bias out of it.
Yeah.
Take your bias out of it.
Not bias, just a belief. But yeah, I was going to give a response. It was I'd probably be looking if I had Drake London, I'd probably be willing to sell for. If we're assuming Superflex, I'd probably want a first and a relevant young piece. You know, I want a decent. I want a good amount. And if I was looking to buy him, I'd be probably trying to sell a first and a lesser piece. Someone that I'm not too worried about losing. Maybe a Romeo Dobbs. You know, Romeo Dobbs and a first for Drake London. I would be happy to get Drake London for that. And I think that's I don't think I'd be able to get him for that, which is why I haven't been able to.
That's fair. So what I told him, I said, if I was looking to buy Drake London, I'd be looking at like probably a mid to late first, probably a late first and like an early to mid second. Like that would be what I would be willing to pay. So I think that kind of goes along your lines of like, you know, maybe an unproven upstart young player with the first, right? I think that's pretty solid value. He came back and said that I guess the person that has London wanted 2 firsts to sell him. And I think that's basically the market right now. If you have him, you're not willing to move him yet. Like you have a high price tag on him because what he has shown over the first couple of years lends you to believe that he can be the type of young receiver that can warrant getting 2 firsts plus a player, et cetera, right? But the fact of the matter is he hasn't yet reached that level, which is why the value of what you're willing to give up to acquire him isn't quite there yet. That's why I think that Drake London is the ultimate hold candidate because you do not want to move him right before he breaks out.
Yeah, I completely agree with that because I think we're already, like you said, we're already pricing him as if he's going to break out.
Yep.
So I think that adds a little bit of risk to the hold, but it also makes it very difficult to let go because we're not the people who don't have him aren't willing to buy for what he will be, and the people that have him don't want to sell him for any less than what he will be.
And that's the thing. If you find somebody that's willing to meet your price, that to me is when you move him.
Yeah. And that goes for anybody. Yeah. Like if someone's willing to meet your price, if it's above market price, go for it. And to speak to that love, I'm in the middle of an 18-team Dynasty startup right now.
You psychopath.
Teams. It's my first time. It's my first time doing so. Dude, we're still drafting. We've been drafting since like mid-May.
I believe it.
There's IDP in it as well, as you can imagine. It's a good, let's see, how many rounds is this? 42. We're in round 38 right now. Yeah, no.
IDP also?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just took Josh Oliver and then Marcus Williams. Yeah, I don't even think I took the right Vikings tight end, honestly. I should have continued.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, but I got auto draft. I was working. But anyway, I'm getting off target here. He went off the board as the wide receiver 12. He went off the board in 218 in that circumstance where we saw, a billion quarterbacks go, but he was 218, the wide receiver 12 off the board. That's how people are valuing him right now.
It's amazing what a quarterback upgrade can do.
Oh my God, yeah.
Truthfully.
Yeah. No, it's massive. So that opportunity is going to be terrific for Drake London. So, and ironically, the player that went, around later in that, I guess wide receiver 16 range in the startup I'm referring to, that is Odunze and the Chicago Bears. And interestingly enough, this Chicago Bears team has also taken quite the upgrade and has had quite the fun offseason of adding Keenan Allen, adding Odunze, bringing in Caleb Williams to the draft. There's a different vibe going around in Chicago right now in the Windy City than has been in past seasons, I think it's fair to say. So normally when we say all that, we are looking at new faces. We do have the same GM and Ryan Poles and the same head coach in Matt Eberflus, although we do have a new play caller in Shane Waldron, who spent the last 3 years in Seattle. And last year, the Luke Getsy experiment, I think it would be fair to say it flopped, despite kind of a late turnaround, but it flopped in terms of what Chicago wanted from Justin Fields. the reasons for which are another, a topic for another show entirely. But Chicago Bears, what are your expectations for this? I was talking to someone yesterday about this, actually, about, this NFC North being as tough as it is. Could Chicago be a surprise playoff team?
100% they can be. So when on Wednesday we were going through and looking at player props, the Bears are plus 3,500 to win the Super Bowl. That is the 7th highest odds in the NFC.
That's so nuts. Wait. In the NFC?
The 7th highest odds in the NFC, which means the books are expecting the Bears to be a playoff team.
That's way too high.
That is the level of expectation that is coming with Caleb Williams at quarterback and all of the offensive pieces that they have brought on.
Do you also know why that is, though? I blame CJ Stroud for that. That's CJ Stroud's fault. We're going to blame him.
I mean, it's CJ Stroud's fault. It's the fact that the Bears are one of the oldest teams in the NFL, and we've been waiting for them to be good for 40 years. It's a lot of things, truthfully. The fact of the matter is, it's fucking crazy.
Yeah. It is absolutely nuts. It's very different from the Mitch Trubisky days and the struggling to put a team together for Justin Fields days and just everything that Chicago has been in recent years. They shouldn't be going forward, although, and we might as well jump right into Caleb Williams because he's the person to talk about in general when we're talking about Chicago. He's struggling in spring practices, Josh. So are we fading him, and should we sell him for Kirk Cousins and a ham sandwich?
Come on. Get the fuck out of here.
The number one thing, and I am a dynasty degenerate, as anybody that watches this show knows, the only thing I hate in the NFL in the NFL cycle is spring reporting. Because there's not, I know there's nothing to write about. I understand what they're forced to do right now, and that everyone still wants to know what Caleb Williams is doing at practice. I don't give a flying shit. I don't. If he's completing 10% of his passes, I don't care. He's transitioning to the NFL. There's going to be a learning curve. I don't care who you are. It's so ridiculous. But Caleb Williams, I mean, we talk about the Bears being put by books as a playoff team. Can Caleb Williams be a fantasy quarterback that gets your team to the promised land? I think the question will come down to how much he's going to be moving and how much that throwing on the run turns into running on the run. But what are your expectations for Caleb Williams' rookie year? I mean, it's the best situation we've seen a number one overall pick walk into and ever.
I currently have him in my projections as QB9 for.
That's a good ranking for him for a rookie season. Yeah. It's very good.
But I mean, a lot of that too. Like, no rookie quarterback has ever had the trio of weapons that he has. Like, I was going through and when we previewed the Bears on Wednesday, which again is more redraft centric. Like, I'm going through and looking at the top 10 passing seasons of all time. And like most of the quarterbacks have like one really solid target, right? I was looking at Jameis Winston. He was one of the top 10 passing seasons of all time.
Yep.
He had Mike Evans. Great. Awesome. You know who his second highest targeted player was that year that he threw for over 4,000 yards his rookie year?
Scotty Miller.
Charles Sims with 70 targets.
Oh, wow. What a throwback.
That's the level of quote unquote quality targets. Guys like Andrew Luck, Jameis Winston, Cam Newton, those guys had in their rookie seasons when they hit these types of numbers. Not a single one had a tandem of wide receivers as accomplished as DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, let alone a third option who was just the top 10 wide receiver picked in the NFL draft. So if Caleb Williams is even 80% of the generational prospect that we expect him to be, that should hands down be a top 10 quarterback in the NFL just this year in terms of fantasy production. He is going to break the Bears single season passing record his first year. I don't think that's a hot take by any means. The question is going to be, can he throw 30 passing touchdowns? Because that's what's going to vault him into true QB1 atmosphere. But his ability to improvise on the run, scramble. Like, yes, people have compared it to Patrick Mahomes, and I get it. It's a little rich for my blood, but nobody knew what Patrick Mahomes would be either, even when he came out.
Yeah.
So, you got to compare someone to someone, and I get it. But again, you're looking at the level of weapons that he has. The sky is the limit for this offense. And
a bigger Kyler Murray has always been what I've seen with Caleb.
And
Williams.
He's not even that much bigger than Kyler Murray.
And he's not. Yeah, it's just the public perception against Kyler at this point.
Caleb Williams is Kyler Murray one rung on a step stool. Like, that's what it is.
Yeah. But in that sense of, two guys that can move if they want to move, and two guys that can hold the ball a little bit too long at times, but they have all the arm talent in the world, and they should be very good players. And obviously Caleb Williams is a terrific prospect in all of that. So, 38-38. That is the record for a single season passing yards with Chicago. It's the only franchise in the NFL that does not have a 4,000-yard passer in its franchise history. And like you said, it's quite the old franchise, which granted, 50 years ago, we weren't expecting 4,000-yard passers, but
well, and that's why I think like this offense is going to shift so much from what
it's going to be unrecognizable.
It's going to be completely unrecognizable. The Bears, for as long as we can remember, have always been, we're going to run the football, we're going to play good defense. And the reason they've never had a 4,000-yard passer is because they've always had game manager type quarterbacks. They've never had that kind of quarterback that can actually throw the football and win games with their arm.
Jay Cuddy. Smoking Jay.
He could throw the football. He just couldn't win the games with his arm. But again, it was still that philosophy with the Bears that really prevented him from reaching those types of numbers, right? When you bring in a Shane Waldron, the last 3 years, the most running plays that he's ever called, 425. He's not calling running plays. So for all you DeAndre Swift stands out there, get ready to be vastly disappointed because it ain't happening. Okay.
And that's the fun thing with Waldron, why I'm so curious to see this play out, is because coming from Seattle, and the big power struggle in Seattle in the last few years has been kind of slowly pulling back from the Pete Carroll theories and the Pete Carroll systems that are, like you said, similar to Chicago, of winning with defense and winning with a dominant run game. And we might be able to point at Waldron and say maybe they would have ran the ball more if the running backs had stayed healthy in recent years, because obviously we've seen every running back under the sun take a stint in Seattle, it feels like, in the last few years because of the injuries they've had, and Tony Jones being a fantasy name for a week. It's been ugly, but that opportunity is so interesting to see replay itself in Chicago with, once again, another quarterback trying to make a name for himself in the league and a up and coming set of receivers around him and so forth. So I'm with you that I'm incredibly excited. I'll bring up Carrington's question on here about N'Keal Harry having value playing tight end. When I was referring to, I might have drafted the wrong Minnesota tight end. I'll clarify. I wasn't talking about N'Keal Harry. I was as fun as that would be, honestly. It would be so fun. I was over Robert Tonyan. So I don't think so. I don't think we'll see N'Keal Harry anytime soon. As you eloquently put, not a chance in hell. Maybe hell will freeze over for that. So let's jump into another little Chicago Bear name here, and I think I want to start with the veteran here of DJ Moore, because this guy is one of my favorite players in the league. Was unbelievably talented and not underutilized, but didn't have the quarterback play in Carolina. Barely had in Chicago, and still put together a monster season last year, thanks to volume. And we're hoping that the talent of Caleb Williams kind of makes up for the lack of volume that we're probably going to see DJ Moore receive, despite. But now that we're talking about it, Josh, I'm curious about how much you think the DJ Moore, if his volume does drop as we're expecting with when you introduce a Keenan and you introduce Rome Odunze, can this offense that we're projecting to take a step forward in both volume and efficiency, can that make up for DJ Moore's perceived drop in volume?
Yeah, I have him with a lower target share than last year, and it still comes out to roughly the same amount of targets as last year. You're still kind of in that 130 target range. Obviously, you bring in someone like Keenan Allen, who I mean, had the most receptions in a season that he's ever had in 2023 and missed 4 games. Like that, and he did all this at 31 years old. So it's fair to say that Keenan Allen still has a step, right? I've seen some takes out there that because, Keenan's up there in age and he has a lot of experience in the slot, that he's going to be the guy that comes off the field when they run in their 12 and 21 personnel. And I can't get behind it yet. I can't. I understand that Odunze is probably more of a outside threat than a slot guy. But if you're telling me that a young rookie can potentially hold his own as a run blocker in the NFL, if needed, over a guy that's a 10-year veteran, I want what you're smoking, because I need that level of relaxation in my life, because it just ain't happening. Maybe in the back half of the season, but it's certainly not happening in the front half of the season, right? So Keenan Allen's still going to be on the field, and he's still going to be very productive. And his redraft price right now is just ridiculous. And even DJ Moore's is ridiculous. He's being drafted as the wide receiver 22, I think. It's way too low for me. Just way, way too low for a guy that should very easily finish as a top 10 wide receiver. Now you flip that script in Dynasty, he's 27 years old. Feels like he's been playing for 10 years, because I feel like we've been talking about him for that long. But he came into the league really young, had a shit situation in Carolina. Now he's in a really good situation in Chicago, which I never thought I would ever say those words together. But he's in the second to last year of the extension that he signed with Carolina, and there's no guaranteed money on his contract after this season. All this extension talk with guys like, Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown, who got extended, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Jefferson, Waddle, CeeDee Lamb. When have you heard DJ Moore's name brought up in that conversation?
Not once.
Not at all. He's still young. He's insanely productive. And he just got the hottest quarterback prospect to come out since Andrew Luck now throwing him footballs. DJ Moore is about to get paid $30+ million a year. And the Bears currently have 50, almost 60 million in cap space for 2025. DJ Moore is about to get paid. Keenan Allen, this is the last year of his deal. You put DJ Moore with Rome Odunze without Keenan Allen, and there's still plenty of targets to go around for both of these guys.
They could bring back Keenan Allen. That's possible too. And
very much so.
And everyone can still benefit from it, because if we see that sophomore leap that we see from quarterbacks, that's all of a sudden we're seeing a lot more 11 personnel in 2025, and everything looks awesome. And it's a dream, which has never been.
And what's great about DJ Moore is that, and what's great about DJ Moore is that he can play all levels of the field. He can be that game breaker down the field, right? He can be the bubble screen, catch it, and yak guy, right? Because he's so good at breaking tackles. He is one of the few wide receivers that can really, truly play in all facets of the field and do literally every single task that is asked of them. You get a lot of these really good wide receivers that are really talented. They're good at some of these things and then not great at others. DJ Moore is great at all of these things. Yeah. And that's really surprising, because I wasn't a huge fan of his when he came out, because I thought he needed a lot of work as a route runner. And I still think he's not the best route runner, but because of his ability to break tackles and win contested catches, he's just become so damn good.
5th in deep targets, but also 8th in yards after catch. It's not easy to do stuff like that. And he's such a good player that I've been a fan of for so long. And I traded Deebo Samuel for him the year before, or a month before Deebo Samuel had his monster breakout, and then DJ Moore was still we're waiting phase of the DJ Moore, and it's been so awesome to see him take this next step. So you perfectly laid it out, that there's really not much he can't do. and, number 5 in yards per team pass attempt as well. He made the most of everything he got, and he got a lot. So if the process stands to reason that if he gets less but still makes the most of what he's got, the quality is going to be better than quantity, which, it hasn't always been the case with DJ Moore, but I think that's going to be the case now. But at the end of the day, and we'll transition on to Rome Odunze here, and to kind of sum up this wide receiver room, rookie expectations, I think it's a tough thing to balance, especially when we're talking about Caleb Williams and the high expectations the Bears have for him. And without saying, it has nothing to do with this the spring form or anything, but we're hoping for a lot with Caleb Williams, and I think we both agree that he's going to be asked to do a lot in this offense that isn't totally on paper built to run the ball very well. It's built to win through the air with the way this team is built. So I'm curious on with Rome Odunze, with Caleb Williams, do you think there's a rookie ceiling that might impact the way we're approaching this entire offense?
I think Rome Odunze's floor is 2023 JSN. And I'm not necessarily saying that just because these two kids are getting ready to play literally in the same offense. But when you look at the situation JSN was drafted into, he was the best player available. He comes in behind DK Metcalf, behind Tyler Lockett, 2 established guys. And you're like, well, crap, JSN, I had such high hopes for. He's not going to get any targets. What's going on? But let's break this down, right? DK Metcalf, mid-20s, already been a number 1 guy. Tyler Lockett, been a number 1 guy, but he's approaching 30 years old, right? Well, what happened? JSN slowly started to earn targets within the system, playing more of a slot role. And I think that, to me, is the biggest difference, because Odunze is not really a slot guy. JSN has typically been a slot guy. But JSN came off the field quite a bit when they did switch to those 12 personnel sets. Odunze, like I mentioned when we were talking about DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, Odunze would likely be the one that would come off the field here as well, because Keenan Allen can play the outside and is very well versed in playing the outside because he's built to be able to withstand that. Tyler Lockett can play outside, but he's always been prototypically more of a slot guy because he's smaller. He's just really fast. But again, it boils down to that experience side of things. Now, Odunze is coming into a situation, established star, DJ Moore, established star, Keenan Allen, also kind of in that 30-year range, right? They're going to spread the football around. They're going to throw it a lot. Cole Kmet has been solid as a tight end. He's done a lot of it off of touchdowns. This system doesn't target tight ends the way that maybe they should, but they also spread the ball around a lot to their tight ends and utilize all of them versus just hyper-targeting one. They brought in Gerald Everett at tight end, who has experience with Shane Waldron from their days both with the Rams and Seattle. Everett's going to cut into Kmet's targets, which is now going to open up more targets for the wide receivers. So that's why I think that Rome Odunze's ceiling with targets is probably in that 90 to 95 range. And for year one, I'd probably put him between 80 and 90. I think I have him projected out at about 87. So I think coming in, you're going to have a buy window for Rome Odunze in 2025 is basically what I'm getting at. Because, again, high expectations. People are going to think that because Keenan Allen's 32 years old, that Odunze can come in and overtake him very quickly. It just doesn't work that way in the NFL. So you're going to see those buy windows the same way that we've seen the buy windows for JSN. Take advantage of it.
And it can also be the same exact situation that we see play out all the time, where the veteran misses time. Something happens, God forbid, that he has to miss a few weeks or he misses longer. And Rome Odunze isn't ready to step in and do what Keenan Allen does, because Keenan Allen is one of the best receivers of the last 10 years. And the other thing that everyone forgets for some reason is that the fun thing about 2 wide receiver sets, Josh, is that they don't have to go 1-1 where they're both boundary receivers. Hey guys, we could do 2 on one side, and you could still have Keenan in the slot if you're saying that Keenan has to be in the slot, which is a fake storyline.
Yep.
Then you can still, they're still going to line up. That still counts as a 2 wide receiver set. If you have 2 wide receivers on the field and they're stacking in the slot, and and out wide.
That's
so
the thing about analytics that not everybody knows and understands, right?
It's just common sense. There's a lack of that in the world. I think we're all aware of, but it's
why it's ironic that it's called common sense.
We're on Twitter. We understand. But yeah, I mean, Odunze is going to be a terrific dynasty asset whenever we have this level of talent paired with another genuinely, I think, a similar level of talent in Caleb Williams of two terrific prospects like that. It's going to work out. I think it's just going to take time. And I think we're going to see that similar rise for JSN. I think I should be the more we talk about Odunze, the more I feel I should be more aggressive about going out and buying JSN. Where this is the window that I think you're talking about with Odunze that might exist in 2025. This is the window right now where
and I think with JSN, you're kind of looking at a similar situation like with Drake London, right? Like you have some people that they're still going to value him like that first round pick that he was. So they're not yet willing to abandon ship.
Mm-hmm.
But based on production upside, because he's still behind Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, that there's still sort of that, like, I guess, cap ceiling on the value in a way. And until one of those guys moves on or shows a true dip in production, JSN is just capped.
JSN right now is the theoretical bad outcome for Rome Odunze, where Keenan Allen returned. Keenan Allen clearly hasn't lost a step, and once again doesn't lose a step. Returns to the Bears offense for another season, like Tyler Lockett did with Seattle. That is, like, I think JSN's value right now is. But I completely agree with you that you're saying JSN's value right now is Rome Odunze's floor, because I think this time next year we could be having the exact same conversation, and I would be so.
Might have to clip this so we can revisit it next year.
I almost feel like it's definitely going to happen because. I think too often we fool ourselves into thinking the veteran is only there for 1 year. Keenan Allen might want to enjoy the benefits of a year or two Caleb Williams too. He's put in the work for year one. Yeah, 7th highest odds is nuts, and honestly, I don't think they're going to reach that. But if they do fine, if they are a borderline playoff team or make the playoffs, Keenan Allen wants to return to that situation. He wants to reap the benefits of what he helped develop. So. I think
for some context here on JSN, Darcy chimes in. She owns JSN. She's holding, and I get it. I would too.
As am I. And I guess it's almost a similar situation to, again, there's so many ties between this team that we're talking, the teams we're talking about today, of Drake London, where the JSN owners aren't really willing to part ways for what people are willing to send. And frankly, I think that's just because I'm not aggressive enough. I need to be more aggressive in my JSN offers.
Be aggressive. Come on, Mike.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're in prime form right now. Are there any sneaky buys that you want to bring up across any of these three teams? This is the Dynasty show where we get to talk about our degenerate loves, the guys that nobody else cares about in the world except for us here on this show. And I'm talking about like I said, the Dylan Johnsons of the world. Any other sneak buys?
Absolutely not. No. So I mentioned it a little bit earlier. To me, I think that with the Titans, you can lump Will Levis into that conversation. Honestly, wouldn't be the worst thing to throw out, 4th round picks for Treylon Burks, right? Like, in the chances that he doesn't get traded in training camp and they actually hold him this year, but then they move off of him like right after the season, like kind of in that free agency window. Because again, like, what's a 4th, what's a 3rd round pick, right? Those are dart throws the same way that, trading for a former 1st round pick is a dart throw. With the Falcons, we talked a little bit pre-show about Darnell Mooney. And I think that's a really good option, especially because there's so many different types of dynasty leagues. Like, I have some where you're talking like 30 to 40 man rosters where you need as much depth as you can possibly get. Trading a 3rd round pick for a Darnell Mooney, I think that's perfect value, right? Like, I swung a deal in one of my leagues. It's a 40 man roster, and this is no IDP. This is all offense, and it's only a 1 QB league. But I swung a deal, got a package back. That package included Darnell Mooney. And I'm like, you know what? I will add this level of depth because injuries are going to happen all the time. We have to start 3 wide receivers and we have 3 flex spots. So give me all the wide receiver depth that I can possibly get with this team that's going to run a lot more 11 personnel that they've run in the last 2 years combined. Mooney's going to be on the field. He's going to be running routes and he's going to see opportunities. And I think that's a very easy, like cheap buy, especially for deeper dynasty leagues. Looking at the Bears, I don't know that I really have like a deep sneaky buy. Khalil Herbert's a little interesting only because he's on the final year of his rookie contract. And I feel like if we're talking about the Bears, we would be doing Joel a disservice without bringing up Khalil Herbert. But he's on the final year of his deal. He has a chance to move on next year. I don't think he's going to see more than a 1-year deal next year, but we've at least seen flashes with Khalil Herbert that he can be an effective running back. And I think that, you know, for a 3rd round pick, he's like a cheap, like 0 RB build dart throw. And I think those are the types of values that you need to be stretching and searching for as your seasons progress.
Yeah, Khalil Herbert is who immediately came to mind among all these 3 teams for me because I think he's a quality football player. I think he has his limitations. That's why he was a day 3 prospect. But yeah, I've had question marks about DeAndre Swift that have been building every single year he's been in the league. It's been like
keep in mind he's never had a fully healthy season while playing in the NFC North.
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't help that either. So I don't know. I have my concerns about DeAndre Swift, and I think that lends to my willingness to take a shot on Khalil Herbert or Roschon Johnson at value. And I think right now people are trying to make Roschon Johnson a bigger thing than Khalil Herbert, despite the fact that Khalil Herbert played better. He just was hurt. That's why we saw Johnson.
Well, they offer different skill sets too. I mean,
yes,
you can argue that Khalil Herbert, yeah, exactly. Roschon Johnson is a very good 3rd down back. He's a good pass catcher, or a good pass blocker. And that's something that DeAndre Swift has struggled with. And it's something that Khalil Herbert is really not good at either.
Yeah, which is what makes DeAndre Swift's fit in this offense so strange, because it almost feels like he's splitting early down roles with Khalil Herbert and then
losing 3rd down roles, which is where he's really good as a pass catcher to Roschon. So, yeah.
And it's not like they can line him up in the slot too often. they got a billion pass catchers they can work with here. Yep. And Gerald Everett, who's also, I guess, technically a pass catcher, even though he's not good. Man, what a disappointment he was. But either way, he's carved out a long career. I'm going off now. Either way. Tennessee, I don't think there's anyone else I want to take a shot on at this point with Treylon Burks. I'm digging my hole deeper with every time I do this. I'm with you that if I can send a 4th
grab that shovel, baby. Let's go. Come on.
Or bad influence. I'm gonna do it. The problem is I can't send offers out because I have them everywhere. He's easily the most, easily a top 5 rostered player in Dynasty for me right now. Which is what makes it all the more painful. But yeah, I'm at this point of the Chigo Okonkwo situation. I think I'm gonna have to wait, and if it happens, it happens. I'm just willing to lose out on that breakout. Like you said, this offense isn't built to work around the tight ends, and it's reflected in the way they've made their offseason moves.
Yeah, I'm actually a little surprised that we seemingly hype up Cincinnati Bengals tight ends every
Mike, second time. Here we go.
And not a damn person has talked about the Chigo Okonkwo breakout this year when this is essentially the same damn offense.
It's the exact same.
If that doesn't tell you that we should just stop hyping up Bengals tight ends, I don't know what will.
But Mike Gesicki had a really good pro day and combine workout. And he can jump.
Chigo Okonkwo is even more athletic.
Yeah, but Chigo Okonkwo hasn't had a one-handed catch in the back of the end zone, 3 years ago. He didn't have that. So
no, he just takes handoffs for 40 yards.
Oh, the Arthur Smith teams with the Jonnu Smith handoffs on the goal line with Derrick Henry on the team. Oh, we'll never have anything like that again. Jeez, my laptop almost fell. Good to see the roll popping in here as well. So I'm glad you're able to make the show, and that's why we were going a little bit long. We were waiting for you, the roll to pop on in. So we try to think about our listeners like that. Yeah, and I'm not going to make a jump for anyone on the Falcons either. I think these are three teams that have very clear-cut roles for their players, with the exception of the Bears running back room. We know what to expect. It's just the level of production that we're going to get. Is it going to be what we hope? Or is it going to be a complete flop? Either way, it's going to come down to the players that we know about. I don't think we have a surprise contributor among any of these teams. And that's what happens when you go out and make big acquisitions, which all three of these teams did. They went out and they got the big stars, and the big stars are going to be stealing the show. So there's plenty of other teams we're going to be talking about that sneaky buys will be way more applicable to, because there's going to be a lot of unknowns about other teams. But these three teams, the only unknown is how good they can be. And the pieces within have every reason to make it great. So either way, Josh, we're an hour and a half in here, and you have been so kind to fill in for Joel on this, and I feel like I have taken up way too much of your time, but it's been a blast. It's been a blast chopping up this morning with you, talking about these three NFC teams here. So thank you. Thank you for hopping on in.
Always happy to fill in. Got to keep the train moving, buddy.
Yeah, listen, train's always moving here on Dynasty After Party. So I want to echo again that point you brought up in the beginning. Be sure to check out Dynasty Nerds and try to get that membership. And when you're doing that, you might as well use our promo code Club Fantasy to get 15% off. You're seeing that at the bottom of the screen right now if you're watching on YouTube. It's again, great group of people, great show, and great tools. And that's really the big thing of, if you want to be your own Dynasty manager, there's really not many good places to go to than that Dynasty film room where you're able to watch and get all the access that you need. So highly recommend use code Club Fantasy to get 15% off. Join the Nerd Herd today. And I think that brings us here to the end of our show here, Josh. So any final words of wisdom for our amazing listeners that have tuned through this chaotic episode that we always have?
Oh, chaos, nothing. This was all smooth sailing.
Chaos is fun.
No. Biggest thing, make sure you are hitting that like on all the videos here at Club Fantasy on YouTube. That's youtube.com/Club Fantasy FFL. Be sure to hit that subscribe while you're there. It takes a couple of clicks and it costs you $0. So save 100% on hitting that subscribe button. Does everything to help us as we continue to grow the channel. We just crossed 1,000, on our way to 2,000 now. So help us get there. Sooner the better, obviously, because we're a lot more fun when we can pay people and produce more content for you guys, because that's what we like to do. So, and then of course, be sure to check out the website clubfantasyffl.com and all the socials: Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram at Club Fantasy FFL.
And if you enjoy content like this, check out the actual articles about the Look Inside series. We're talking about it here as a Dynasty angle. We have more of a redraft look, so it's even a more fresh look at these teams for Atlanta, for Tennessee, and for the Bears. All that can be found on clubfantasyffl.com, so be sure to check that out. So for myself, at Michael_Sicoli on Twitter, you can follow Josh here at the One Hudsonian, and of course, Club Fantasy FFL at Club Fantasy FFL. Be sure to check out all those follows like Josh was just saying. And thank you all for tuning into this week's episode of the Dynasty After Party. Stay healthy, stay safe, because remember, Dynasty is like a disco ball, keeps on spinning year round. So join the club every Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern, here at Club Fantasy. Thank you.